Health Minister Duclos responding to a brutal report from the Auditor General that found 37% is the percentage of incoming travelers at the Public Health Agency of Canada was unable to verify their compliance with that mandatory quarantine orders in the first half of 2021. According to this new scathing report from the Auditor General, it found, quote, significant gaps in the enforcement of quarantine and COVID-19 testing orders. Remember, incoming travelers were required to book a 3-day quarantine hotel stay, but the requirement was dropped for all air travelers in August. The parliamentary watchdog found that Canada's Public Health Agency did not have records of stay for, get this, 75% of travelers who flew into Canada. The agency didn't know whether those who were required to stay at the quarantine hotels actually did. The agency deemed over 136,000 travelers, quote, high risk for non-compliance with mandatory quarantine orders. But they were unaware of the outcomes for 59% of those high-risk cases, 59% when referred to law enforcement. The Auditor General also found that from February to June of 2021, Canada's Public Health Agency was unable to match or find COVID-19 test results for 30% of incoming travelers. That's about 80,500 on-arrival tests results and 57,000 post-arrival tests. And of those travelers with missing or unmatched results, get this, only 38% of them were contacted to inform them that their quarantine period would be extended until another test was completed. Not only that, of the over 8,000 travelers who tested positive for COVID, the agency did not contact 14% of them. The new findings were technically actually an improvement from the Auditor General's highly critical March audit, but still described, quote, as not a success story by the Auditor General. And with the feds bringing back their mandatory quarantine hotels for all travelers due to the Omicron variant, will the government heed the lessons of the Auditor General, or is the system too broken to ensure that this round of travel restrictions will be successful? Let's find out. Joining me now is the Auditor General, Karen Hogan. Auditor General, always a pleasure. Can you outline the most egregious errors you found in terms of the enforcement of border control measures?
It's always a pleasure to be here and talk about our reports, Evan. Thank you. As you mentioned, this is a bit of a follow-up report from our report in March. And while there was improvement in that the agency was able to contact more travelers, it's concerning that they were unable to tell us whether or not a third of travelers were properly quarantining. And so I am disappointed that they hadn't applied lessons learned from this first round of measures to the new border control measures. And it's clear that they need to improve their ability to monitor and enforce the measures at the border.
You say, quote, the agency's ability to confirm whether more than a third travelers comply with quarantine rules remains a significant problem. Has that changed as the new quarantine hotels are up now?
Well, I haven't looked at the new quarantine hotels. Obviously, that requirement happened after the end of our audit. But during our audit period, we were looking at whether or not those travelers that came in and needed to quarantine and wait for 3 days to get their test results, whether or not they were checking into the hotels and properly quarantining. But the agency had not really set up a system in order to gather the information and know. And as such, were unable to tell us whether or not 75% of incoming travelers stayed at the hotel waiting for that first test result.
The other question is there any excuse for Public Health Agency not being able to contact 14% of travelers who tested positive?
I think this is something that we saw in the first time, that they were trying to do everything on paper and trying to match travelers with their contact information. And we saw a similar issue here with the test results. And so there were 30% of the test results that were either missing or unable to be matched to a traveler. And that's because of the poor data, the poor information that they had. And it is concerning that over 1,000 test results with a positive test result, those individuals were not contacted by the agency.
Just finally, was there any metric to find out if any of these measures were effective? Was there a mechanism to find out, for all the money and all the time spent, and we're doing it again, do they work, these measures?
I think everybody plays a part in helping stop the spread of the pandemic, and measures are absolutely needed. And it's not up for me to decide which are the measures that should be in place, should they be added or removed. My job was to look at whether or not the agency enforced and monitored the ones that were there. Right. So it's clear that they need to find a better way to be on top of the monitoring and enforcement of these measures because we do need to help reduce the spread of COVID-19.
Right. If you don't monitor or enforce, it's hard to know if these things actually work. One of the other reports has to do with temporary foreign workers, especially on farms. You found that a number of quarantine inspections for the agriculture temporary foreign workers had gotten worse. 88% of the inspections were deemed problematic. That's up from 73%, I think, in 2020. What did you find there? What stands out to you?
Well, here the temporary foreign worker program is in place to help fill labor shortages in the agricultural sector. And Employment and Social Development Canada uses inspections in order to monitor whether or not employers in the agricultural sector, here mostly farmers, had put in place the measures to help protect the health and safety of temporary foreign workers. And what we found was that the quality and rigor and timeliness of the inspections was so poor that the department is unable to tell us whether or not the health and safety was protected. So they really did let down temporary foreign workers.
And we saw the cost of that. Auditor General Karen Hogan, I hope you join me this week as well on CTV's Question Period for a deep dive into these issues. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you, Auditor General.
Thank you. I always enjoy talking about our reports. Thanks, Evan.